When you're running a homestead, you could quite easily get overwhelmed by just how many things are dependent on your constant time and attention. Animals, plants, systems. It could get to the point where you feel like you can't even leave the property for fear of something critical breaking down or something going wrong while you're away. Well, we want to make sure we get to enjoy this lifestyle and not feel enslaved to it, so we're using technology to help ease that burden. In this video, I want to share with you some of my favorite technology, gadgets, low-tech, high-tech, that we've implemented around our homestead to make sure we never miss an important task or a system failure. We've got a couple of internet options available to us out here, being satellite and fixed wireless broadband. And so we've gone with satellite through Starlink, and it's awesome. It's high speed, it doesn't cost a heap. It's not the cheapest. Fixed wireless broadband would have been a little bit cheaper, but some of those are becoming less and less reliable. The only downside to Starlink or satellite internet is on a really cloudy day, it can slow down a little bit, and you've got to make sure you've got clear view of the sky to where the majority of the satellites are. Now, in our case, that worked out great because just south of our tiny home, there's a nice big opening to the sky, and it seems like most of the satellites are in the south. And that makes sense. Our most populated areas are like Sydney and Melbourne, which are south of us. All right, first and probably most critical system would be our solar power system. Now, this was a total DIY system. We built it ourselves. You can check out some of our other videos about that. But one of the things we opted for was the device that makes it internet connected, and so we can remotely monitor it from anywhere. There's an app on my iPad, iPhone, there's a web browser version that I can check out what's going on with our power system. And that becomes really important on critical days, like if we have a run of cloudy days and our battery storage is getting quite low, we kind of need to know whether or not we need to kick in the generator just to top those up. And it's a bit of a pain to do that if everything's already gone off, because then there's kind of a sequence we've got to follow to kind of power things up one at a time. But where it's really important is for critical things. So if we were away for a few days over summer, for example, then we've got the potential to lose all of the food in our fridges and freezers. Or if we were incubating chickens, that's probably one of the most critical ones, because those incubators, they can't go off not even for 10 minutes. If that temperature drops right down, that would be a huge problem. And so being able to monitor what our power is doing, and also then being able to kind of look at the system and just look over the last few days and see where our power heavy usage has been and making adjustments. So I've made other videos where I've talked about how we've adjusted the angle of our solar panels, but also adjusting our own kind of habits and power usage. We've done that in response to what we've been able to learn from this app. So that's been a really helpful system, and I love that we can check in on it wherever we are. Well, speaking of things internet connected, one of my favorite gadgets is our personal weather station. Now, this one was a cheap one. I think it was like $100 off Amazon, and you can buy them almost anywhere. I wish it had a little bit more functionality. So for example, to be able to set alerts based on custom parameters, that could be super useful, but it has heaps of features. So our closest weather monitoring station is actually pretty far away from us. So while we can get weather updates, they're not super accurate, and especially when it comes to rainfall. And given our region, it can be raining really heavy on one of the neighboring properties and not at all on ours. And so I love that I can monitor rainfall, because that's one of those things you can easily lose track of. If it's been raining for a few days in a row, you kind of feel like you've had heaps of rain, and then you check your rainfall gauge and actually it's not been all that much at all. And that's important when it comes to things like managing the watering system for your gardens, for example, knowing when to turn that on and off in response to just how much rain we've had. Now, one of the other cool things about this system is that you can link it up to a worldwide system of personal weather stations, and we've gone with the Weather Underground. It's one of the biggest ones, and what that means is we can check our local weather from wherever we are in the world and see what's going on the property. But what it also means is if you don't have one of these devices, you could pull up that website and check the map, and there's a fairly good chance that one of your neighbors has one. And so there are literally thousands of people around the world all contributing their personal weather data to this system, and that's just really cool. Well, by far one of the most useful pieces of technology that we have implemented all around our homestead are these Wi-Fi smart plugs. And there's a few different ways that we're using them. The first would just be for convenience. Now, Most of them will have built into them a timer function, so like your old school timer that you can put on your lamp to make it look like you're home when you're not, but way more usable than that. So you can set schedules and program them and all sorts of things. I'll give you an example of just how we're using these for convenience. So I've got one hooked up to the espresso machine and it's on a schedule. It comes on about 7:30 every morning when I know I'm going to have enough power in the batteries. But I usually leave early in the morning to drop JJ at work, and on my way home from dropping him at work, he's about half an hour away, I will first pull up on my phone our solar power system and check just how much power is in the batteries, and if there's enough, I'll dial into this, click it on, and that way the coffee machine's already heated up as soon as I get home, so I can have a coffee pretty much first thing in the morning. But we're using these in some really important and critical ways as well. So for example, this is a different kind of one. So this one I think is a TP-Link. This one is made by Arlec. It's a bit older and it looks a bit sun damaged because it's an outdoor friendly one. And so you can use these in outdoor applications. But the reason I like this one, and it was a little bit more expensive, is because it's got power monitoring in it. So anytime we hook up a new appliance or device to our system, obviously power usage is really important to us out here. Being completely off grid, we need to know exactly how much power every single device uses and how it's going to impact the overall system. So recently we bought a deep freezer, a chest freezer, and it's an older one. It was secondhand. I wanted to see just how kind of power friendly it was. So we hooked this up to it, we plugged it in and we let it run for 48 hours, and then I was able to, through the app, dial in and get a history of its power usage over a 2-day period, and I could see just how much power it was using and how that was contributing to our overall loads. An example of how I'm using one of these Wi-Fi power points in a critical application would be through the raising of our baby chicks. Our baby chicks need a warm, even temperature, especially overnight, and especially in those first few weeks of their development. So they've got a brooder heat plate in their brooder box that keeps them nice and warm overnight, and it's on a timer. Again, it's just one of those tasks that you do routinely. It's every single day, it's at the same time every day, so why not use technology just to ease that burden? But an example of how remote connectivity to that device makes life a whole lot easier is, let's say I wake up in the morning, I feel like it's a little bit colder than usual. I log into our weather station, I notice the temperature really dropped overnight, and maybe the chicks are going to need just a little bit of extra warmth. Well, that brooder heat plate's going to go off at 6:30 in the morning because usually they don't need it after that, but I can log into this PowerPoint, make sure that it's on for an extra couple of hours. And look, I could just go out there and remotely turn it on, but that's just an example of where I'm using technology to make life a bit easier, because there are 1,000 tasks like that. So if I can do that from the comfort of my bed, coffee in hand, then why not? Okay, speaking of raising baby chicks, we incubate and hatch our own eggs here on our homestead, and monitoring temperature and humidity and the power to those incubators is really, really important. So if you know anything about incubating, getting that temperature and humidity absolutely perfect is really important, and a loss of especially temperature, say overnight when you weren't paying attention to it, could be devastating. So we found these devices. They're by a company called Yolink. I think they might be like a Chinese company. We found them on Amazon. And the reason I love these temperature and humidity monitoring devices is there's heaps of companies that make them, but they also make a companion device called a power outage alarm. So again, it's internet, Wi-Fi enabled. They all connect to a hub that I can then log into from wherever and see what's going on. And the main thing I love about these is that I can set alerts. So the first alert that's really important is this power outage alarm. So it's going to send me an alert to my phone anytime the power goes out. And so they advertise these for things like, say, wine fridges and things where if the power went out and you were kind of keeping, I guess that's important, like if you've got a really expensive wine collection. But in an incubator scenario, that is really important. And I've had it happen before where the power has gone out overnight. I didn't realize it. The incubators went off for a couple of hours. Power's come back on in the morning. It looks like everything's okay, but the development of those embryos in those eggs has basically stalled, and so you lose the whole batch. So I've actually got one of those hooked up out in the shed where the incubators are, and it can send alerts, but I've got a second one inside the house because it's on the same power circuit. And so as soon as the power goes off overnight, which can happen pretty regularly out here, especially because we're on battery power overnight because we're 100% off grid, then this device starts a really annoying alarm that is going to wake me up no matter how deep asleep I am, and I can quickly get up and attend to that. So if I need to fire up the generator to make sure we've got power for a little bit longer, then I can do that. Hey, just before I tell you about the next gadget that we've implemented on our homestead, can I tell you about our Patreon page? So we're really excited to be building a community of like-minded people that are into this whole homesteading and off-grid way of life. So we've started a Patreon page, we've linked it to a Discord server, so we want to make sure that we can keep the conversation going. If you want to be a part of that and all the extras that come with that, you know, behind the scenes content, all of that, you can check out our Patreon. There's a few different levels that you can get in at, so check that out in the link down below. Another example of a piece of technology that's just taking care of a routine task for us is garden irrigation. So one of these Holman garden irrigation systems, there's a bunch of different brands. I like the Holman ones because I've got the more expensive big brother to this. It's got multiple zones, it's Wi-Fi connected, it's got solenoids hooked up to it. We're not at that stage yet with our gardens, but as we bring things online like our little vineyard and our orchard, our herb gardens and multiple zones, then I'll definitely implement that system. But for now, a little device like this, I think this was about 60 bucks. I picked this up from Bunnings, is really easy to just kind of plug and play. It is only Bluetooth, so it's not Wi-Fi. I can't dial into it, you know, while I'm off the property. But as long as I'm within Bluetooth range, which is pretty far, then I can log in, I can manually stop start, I can change the schedule. And the schedule is probably the main reason you want this, because you just put it in line, you know, that connects to the tap, hose connects to there, and I just program a schedule. Now, the other thing I've connected to it is one of these flow meters. Again, just a cheapy Bunnings purchase. That might have been about $25. I'm using this on our irrigation system right now because we're still in setup phase and I want to know just how many liters of water our gardens are absorbing, and I'm taking notes of how many liters I'm using on a really hot dry day versus on overcast days or rainy days, and so I'm using that information to help me come up with programs for watering our gardens. Again, I could get out there and do that task manually, and often I do. I like being out in the gardens, but you know, why fill up a watering can 100 times to water your gardens when you can use a hose? Well, the same thinking applies. Like, why turn the tap on and off 3 times a day when you can use a piece of tech to do it? So for $50, that one's just peace of mind. And again, it's one of those things where if I do go away for a few days, I don't even have to get somebody to look after this one like they would our dogs or our chickens or whatever. This one's just going to look after the gardens for us. And not all of the technology that we've implemented around our home is necessarily digital or high-tech. In fact, some of the most low-tech systems that we've implemented are really giving us peace of mind. And a great example of that would be our chicken waterer. Our chicken waterer is just a barrel with a couple of waterer nipples screwed into the bottom of it, and the chickens just learn how to kind of drink from those waterer nipples themselves. So that's a low-tech implementation. Another one is an auto door on our chicken coop, and I talk about this in detail on another video. But there are really expensive versions of these, and I do like for example, the one from Omelette. It's got like a crush sensor in it. It's got daylight or timer programming on it. This one is just a simple daylight one. So as soon as it's got enough light on that light sensor, the door opens. When it gets darker, the door closes, and the chickens pretty quickly learn when to put themselves away. This is a cheapy $30 one. Like the one I've used from Omelette in the past was, I think, about $300. Definitely worth it, and so we might upgrade to that in the future. Would I trust a cheapy piece of technology like this against predators, for example? Probably not, but I don't have to worry here because our chickens are right up close to the house where our dogs are, so they'd alert us if a fox came close, but also they're in a yard, so the door is only on their coop, which is within a yard, so I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so what's the point of all of this? I mean, other than I obviously love gadgets and I'm kind of an early adopter when it comes to technology, the point is it's about balance. A homestead is 1,000 different tasks that are requiring your attention every single week. And so if we can use a bit of technology around the place to bring that balance to our lives, then we're gonna do it. So I want to hear from you. What's some technology or gadgets that you've implemented in and around your homestead? It doesn't even need to necessarily be Wi-Fi enabled or digital. Think high-tech, low-tech, mechanical. What's something that you've put in place that's just taking the burden from you? Thanks for joining us on this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week.